6:30 and went into executive session. We're now out of the executive session and continuing on with the meeting of the select board at roughly 7:05. And the first thing on our agenda right now are the minutes of July 13th, 2021. Is there a motion?
Move we accept the minutes subject to modification.
Is there a second?
Second.
Page 1. Page 2. And page 3. Hearing no corrections, then all those in favor of approving the minutes of July 13th, 2021, say aye.
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 Any opposed? One abstention. Jeff? So now move on to public comment. Is there anyone in the room who wishes to make any public comment? Please identify yourself.
Sorry?
Please identify yourself.
Okay, great. Hi, I'm Kaylin McCamp. Hi, everyone. It's exciting to be here in person tonight. I'm Kaylin McCamp. I'm a 5-year resident of Williston, and I work in UVM's Office of Sustainability. I'm a member of the community group Sustainable Williston as well. And I'm joined by other members tonight, and I ask them to stand up with me now. For the last year, we've been focused on the adoption and implementation of the energy plan. When it was being considered by the select board last summer, we gathered 94 signatures on a letter in support of the plan, emphasizing the need for an energy coordinator and committee to enact it. We have some of those signatories here tonight too, so if you aren't a member but you signed the letter, we'd welcome you to stand as well. Climate change is primarily driven by human beings burning fossil fuels as an energy source. So that's why we keep talking about climate change when we talk about the need for this plan and the coordinator and committee. In the year since the adoption of the plan, we've seen devastating climate events near and far, making climate change even more impossible to ignore and the need for action at all scales painfully apparent. So finally tonight, we're also joined by some newcomers to this effort who aren't included in those signatories, but also support the creation of the Energy Committee and hiring of a full-time permanent energy coordinator. So anyone that applies to can also stand. I think we're kind of standing room only here. Last meeting's future issues document said that the Energy Committee might be a topic for tonight, so that's why we're here. We see that got postponed until September, but because the final agendas only come out a few days in advance, it's hard for the public to get organized for the right time. So we wanted also to show you, because we know that it can be hard from a Zoom screen to see how much support there is for this, to show up tonight anyway, and show you just a small sampling of residents who support the creation of a formal energy committee and hiring of a full-time permanent coordinator. So we know that existing staff are taking on what they can of the energy plan, and while we commend and appreciate that, it simply isn't enough. The plan has 71 pathways or initiatives, and a lead entity is identified for each of those. 12 of the pathways are assigned to the energy coordinator, and 15 are assigned to the energy committee. So that's almost 40% of the plan assigned to lead entities who don't yet exist 1 year into the plan's adoption. There are, however, 2 pathways that the select board is listed as the lead entity for. Pathway 1.1, hire an energy coordinator, and pathway 1.2, establish an energy committee. So we together tonight urge you to follow through in your leadership by beginning the formation of an energy committee immediately. I do see a lot of potential volunteers here, and including funding for a full-time energy coordinator in the next budget. We look forward to participating in future select board meetings where this is an agenda item, hopefully soon. And we also welcome any responses or reactions you might have tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So it's the board's intent to fully discuss the issues, probably not until September when we have formulated a plan to go forward on all of the issues that you discussed and probably some others as well. So the town manager will be working on that and will be bringing forward a document sometime, hopefully by mid-September. And I expect a room full of people again at that point. So thank you. Is there anyone else who has any public comment tonight? Yes, sir. If you'd please identify yourself.
I wasn't on the program, but my name is Ken Grossman. My wife and I just pre-pandemic bought a place over on South Road, right across the street from Mud Pond. And I wanted to just tell you how grateful I am, and my wife is, to be here in Williston. It looks like a terrific community. And I just want to mention a couple of specific things. Tomorrow, there's a woman coming over from a program, I think it's called Blue, to teach us how not to let all the water running down our hill doesn't wind up in Lake Champlain. And there's no cost to us for talking to her, and that's terrific. That's a good thing that, as a greater community, you do. And then I got a letter in the mail from a woman who is the conservation planner for the town of Williston. And she invited us next Wednesday to walk around Mud Pond, which we've done 100 times already anyhow. And she was going to share with us a plan for some do-overs on Mud Pond. That's going to cost some serious money. And we're really grateful that you're going to, make the effort to do that, because it's worth it. And the other thing I'm grateful for is all these folks behind me. And I think you should listen to them and set up that energy committee, get that energy coordinator, because that issue is more important than the water running down into Lake Champlain, and more important than preserving Mud Pond. It's everything. Do the right thing.
Thank you. Any other public comment tonight from people in the audience? Any public comment from people who may be watching on the TV or Zoom?
I don't see any, Terry.
Nothing?
Nope.
If not, then thank you very much for coming. You're certainly welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting or parts of the meeting if you're interested in that. And we'll be going on with the rest of the agenda. So thank you all for coming. It's been a long time since we've had a room full of people.
Thank you, everybody.
So we'll proceed on then with interviews and appointments. And tonight we have a candidate for the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission, representative from the town, and to consider the appointment of that individual. So Andrew Watts, if you're here, please come up to the table, and glad to have you here and you're interested in the position. So we do have your application and extensive resume as well. So perhaps you just tell us briefly your background, what you think you're qualified to do this job, and you're interested in doing it.
Well, Mr. Chair, before that,
Yes.
just as a full disclosure, I don't consider this to be a conflict of interest, but I am, and Andy is an assistant attorney general. He works with the attorney general's department within the Agency of Human Services, and I'm actually the chief of that division. So I'm not his boss, but I'm his boss's boss. But anyway, I don't have power over him or something like that. But I just wanted people to be aware. Again, if people are uncomfortable with that, I'll recuse myself. But I don't see
Appreciate
technical or
this.
substantive conflict.
Appreciate the disclosure if anybody has any problem with that. Nope, no, very good, so,
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. I guess I'm here, maybe perhaps I prepared myself a little bit too formally. I didn't mean to come overdressed. Members of the board, thank you for having me. Mr. Wells as well, thank you. About a year ago, I really expressed a desire to want to be involved more in a volunteer basis in the community of Williston. It is something that has always been important to me to be able to give back to the many. I have been fortunate to have many opportunities in my life, and I've spent the bulk of my career in government service. And I do believe that I consider myself to be a servant of the people, but I also want to be able to step outside the role that I have in which I'm paid to be able to give back to the town that I have grown to love so much. And the community that I love so much in Chittenden County and the Burlington area. I had some trepidation about getting involved during the pandemic just because I didn't really understand. I've never been on a public board. I've been on a private board before, but I really wanted to be able to wait until I could be substantively involved in person, at least a bulk of the time, hoping, fingers crossed, that we don't go back down the road that we went over the past 2 years. But I do have a background. I am an attorney. I've been licensed to practice since 2005, the bulk of which, as I said, has been involved in state government. If you can tell by my accent, I am not local. I moved here from Tennessee a couple years ago. My wife and I loved the area so much that we reached out, and I found a job. And Mr. Kenny is correct that he does work in the same division and is our chief, but I really love my job, and I'm not just saying that. It is a wonderful opportunity to be able to truly work and assist persons with mental illness. That is the focus of my practice. And being able to, I've often said, I work with other people and we have adversarial court hearings, but we're not really fighting. We're fighting for what's the best way to help this person that might be mentally ill. That's a pretty good position to be in, that there's not a bad guy, and so all that being said, before I went to law school, I have a background in logistics and transportation. I worked for a trucking company for a couple of years and have just a generalized interest in being a part of, I'm not an engineer, but being a part of an organization that can truly foresee and plan the future and be able to adapt to the changes and hopeful the population growth that we are experiencing in this area. I note in particular one portion of this committee of the commission is the corridor study of I-89, which I think Williston is a huge stakeholder in that. And as that goes, obviously that's a long-term project, but with the growth that's seen in Williston and perhaps the additional growth that's going to be going on down around the Taft Corners area, obviously the roads are going to have to be adjusted over time. There's going to have to be changes in infrastructure. Obviously, aging infrastructure, we are aware of that with the tragedy in Miami just a few weeks ago, but certainly being a part of something that would be able to help not only beautify the area, but also help keep things safe, increase commerce, and be able to just make the area even a better place as far as from a visual standpoint. It's important to me. And I believe that I can bring that background, and particularly as it pertains to Williston. And I understand that this is a county-wide agency. There's many representatives, and I certainly would do, if I were appointed to this position, would carry the goals of Williston to that committee, but with the secondary goals as well of beautifying Chittenden County and helping our other communities and sister communities in the area and the county achieve their goals as well. And in a nutshell, I really want to be more involved in the community, and I feel like this is a good way for me to start.
thank you very much. Interesting enough, our last representative to the RPC, was an attorney as well. Questions from the board for Andrew?
I'm sorry, did you say it's okay to call you, is it okay to call you Andy?
Please call me Andy.
Okay,
Yes.
good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Andy, I guess my bottom line question is what do you see, what do you envision the role of the representative to the planning commission to be, and how do you anticipate carrying that out?
Well, obviously, I have spoken with Mr. Wells. I understand, I would certainly want to get my pulse on the select board's goals and speak with Mr. Wells and understand the community's desires, which I'm not in the position to have that information yet. If I were appointed, I would certainly want to make the time to be able to understand what the goals of Williston are and be able to take that and apply that with the interest, of course, of the countywide commission, but be able to have our own individual voice and to make sure that our voice is carried out so that, you know, I don't want to say that any other community would step on Williston, but I would want to be able to be in a place that I could be an active voice and a professional voice that would be able to carry the boards and the town's goals forward. How I would do that individually is as issues arise, I'm going to consult with Eric. I'm going to consult with the board if necessary. I consider myself, one of the things that I'm best at is communicating, in my opinion. I'm not good at a lot of things, but I can communicate. And in my experience as an attorney, I believe it's important. Obviously, one of the most key elements of being an attorney is being able to communicate. If you have a message, return the message immediately, as soon as you can. Don't leave people hanging. Get that information back out there and provide concise and accurate information so that people can make a decision.
Good, thank you. It's okay, right? You mentioned you thought this would be a good way to get started. In my opinion, if you want to start, the planning commission might not be the best place to start because that's a pretty heavy goal. So my question is are you ready for that? And do you think, are you aware of the heaviness of the role?
I've done some research on the role. I understand that it involves work. I can do it. I've been a prosecutor for 13, 14 years before this. I've tried everything from driving under the influence cases to triple homicides that take a month. I can do this.
Okay. So after doing that full time, you're okay with spending a couple more hours in these? I'm just,
I understand the
You
question and the
understand.
concern.
Yeah.
If
And what-
I would not be wasting your time if I didn't think that I could do this.
and what impresses me about how you're presenting yourself and what is the homework you've done. It certainly seems like you know what you're getting into. I just want to make sure, I want to hear it from your mouth.
I appreciate the concern, and I would rest assured that I would not be applying for this if it was not something that I had not researched and was prepared to take on.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Well, before I ask this one, just a little bit of explanation is, for some reason, this fell on me, tradition. It's a conflict of interest question, and I will probably learn something tonight from the way you answer it. But the question is how would you recognize a conflict of interest, and what would you do about it?
In what regard? What kind of conflict would you suggest?
Well, it might actually be somebody you know who, either through personal, friendship, knowledge. I don't exactly know.
That's fair. Obviously, when someone practices law, and obviously legal conflicts of interest are not always the same as a board member's conflicts of interest. But I believe, first of all, that if there is a potential conflict, I'm going to disclose that. If I feel like there is even a potential of that, the first contact I would make is with Mr. Wells, and I would advise him that I'm not sure if this is a conflict. I believe that I could exercise very good judgment on whether or not I have a conflict. But my first step would be with Mr. Wells. If it's necessary, I would come to the board and have a discussion with the board. But without knowing what the potential conflict is, it's hard for me to say what action I would take. But I am keen on recognizing what potential conflicts are. And there is a difference between a potential conflict and a conflict. So without knowing an exact hypothetical, it would be difficult for me to say exactly what I would do. And I wouldn't want to hamstring myself or the board in that. But I could just honestly say that if there was a potential, I would raise that issue.
Okay, good, thank you.
Any other questions? If not, and if you're ready to make a motion, I'd be willing to accept one.
I'll move to appoint Andrew Watts as the town's representative to the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission for an unexpired term through June 30, 2022.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there any discussion on the motion?
Quick question, Eric, has anybody else applied for the position?
Nope, we haven't. I've been serving in the interim, so to make sure we had a representative for the last year or so.
Okay.
So I had a good conversation with Mr. Watts, and I'd certainly recommend his appointment.
Good, thank you.
Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Congratulations. We look forward to your hard work.
Thank
Point
you,
of
Mr.
order,
Chairman.
Thank
though.
you,
I
Andrew.
would like the board to know that this man is on his best behavior tonight. He's never called me Mr. Kenny in his life.
I actually called you, I think, Mr. Vice Chairman.
Yeah, and then Mr. Kenny too. So.
Yeah.
And I will say, actually, he's very patient. You know, I know you're not supposed to say there's no such thing as a stupid question, but in the electronic filing that the lawyers have to do for the trial courts these days, I have asked a lot of stupid questions to Andy, and he's been extremely patient and kind. And he wasn't calling me Mr. Kenny or Vice Chair.
Just what did he call you? No.
Well, to my face, I can tell you, but what he says afterwards, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think there was a hot mic, though.
Yeah. All right, well, thank you.
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Look forward to working with the board and for the town.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew.
I'll be in touch.
Yeah, I'll be in touch with you soon. Thanks.
Next on the agenda is the Community Justice Center Executive Board appointments. And Crystal Lee McSweeney is here to give us a little bit of, remind us of why we're doing this tonight. And we'll ask that she introduce the people that are here to be appointed for just a short introduction of themselves.
Thank you. So following the last meeting that we had here, we presented to you a new set of bylaws to change the kind of the operating structure of the CJC. And under that, we wanted to create an executive board with membership underneath that. And seeing as that was approved by all of you, we went forward with the interview process for people who were interested in filling the 3-year, 2-year, and 1-year slots. And I have all 9 members here this evening who have all prepared a 1-minute or less bio of themselves. I thought it would be really interesting for all of you to meet them and for them to also have the opportunity to meet all of you and share a little bit about why they're interested in this role. So I can call the first 3, if that makes sense, to
That's
have them
fine.
come up.
Yep.
So for the first 3, we have Bob Stafford and Brett Lindemith and Melinda Moulton. One more chair. I can.
I'll get up.
Good evening, I'm Bob Stafford. I'm a representative from Richmond. I think many of you know me. I presently work for the Vermont Agency of Education, have done so since 2014. Prior to that, I have 40 years of law enforcement experience as a police chief in 2 states with the Vermont State Police and also running the New Hampshire Police Academy. The reason I'm so happy to be a part of this group of people is because I believe in the mission. And even at my elderly stage in the criminal justice system, I see the value of restorative practices and have been on this group, participated with this group for the last 1.5 years. Presently the chairperson, and I understand with the new configuration, I can easily be removed from that. So I'm not sure if I'll be the chair the next time I meet with you, but I've always been involved in some sort of civic action because I think it's so important to give back to the community. So thank you for providing this opportunity for me, and hopefully we'll see you in the future.
Thank you, Bobby.
Hi, good evening. My name's Melinda Moulton, and I've been a resident of Huntington for 45 years. I came here in 1974, and my husband and I built a little stone house, and we've been there for 45 years. I'm also the CEO of Main Street Landing. I've spent the last 40 years redeveloping the Burlington waterfront, and I have served. Oh, am I too loud? I'm so sorry. My husband says, honey, you're being a little too loud. I've served on many, many boards over my last 45, 50-year career. And most recently, I was just appointed to the ACLU Vermont Board. And I was just so delighted when I heard about the Williston Restorative Justice Center and was encouraged to participate in this work. I really believe that we have to look at humanity in today's world and understand that punishment just doesn't work for folks who do not do criminals, hard crimes, and that we need to take people and help them to move into a better world and into a better life. And that's what this organization does. And I was so moved to be a part of this, to be able to listen to the cases and help folks move from where they were to a better place and to have healing instead of punishment. So I'm just so delighted that I was asked to join the executive committee. I was like, wow, that's really cool. So here I am, and I'm delighted, and I hope that you accept my appointment.
Thank you.
And thank you for being supportive of this work, by the way, as your town. It really says a lot about your town.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Brett Lindemuth, and I am also a resident of Huntington, which is an area served by the center. I am very excited to be asked to do this. I have been working with Krista Lee, sending her cases as a police officer for years, and loved it from the moment that I started doing it. I've been on the panels as a member of the center since this year, doing the actual panel work and not just being a participant. So I'm excited to be part of this. I'm glad to be asked to be a youth-focused member of the executive board, because that really is my specialty. I'm an SRO as a police officer, and I'm presently employed in Heinsberg. I worked for 8 years in Richmond PD, and I've been almost 2 years in Heinsberg PD. I'm the youth officer in Heinsberg. I'm the school liaison in Heinsberg. I have 4 children. One is off to college next year in Utah, 2 at the high school level, 1 going into middle school. Her name is Plum, and she's my favorite. And so, yeah. So again, my life is very kid focused. So that's what I'd like to bring to this organization, which I really am glad that I was asked to be a part of it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And next we have Mia Marinovich, Ed Townley, and Patrick Brown.
Hi, I'm Mia Marinovich. I have been a resident of Williston for over 25 years, and I've worked for the Burlington School District as long as that. I have 3 children, 17, 15, and 13. And I've always been a part of this community. When I first moved here, I was a volunteer firefighter. And I've been on the board for the past few years and have loved every part of it. And I've appreciated the training. It has affected me in all facets of my life in a positive way. And I feel like my experience as a community member and as a parent and as an educator brings a lot to our board, and I'm excited to be asked to be on the executive board. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Ed Townley. I've been a resident of Williston for the last 28 years. Prior to retiring a year ago, I had spent the last 5 years as the CEO of Cabot Creamery. Currently, I work part-time consulting with him, but I've also started to reach out to the community to try to give back more to it. I've joined the board of directors for Vermont Special Olympics. I have 2 children with special needs, and I know how they can engage in the legal process, and the fact that many people with intellectual disabilities end up in kind of the wrong place at the wrong time. So I represent that part of the community as much as anything, and I love being part of Community Justice Board for the panel discussions that I've been involved with so far. I can see how that really does change people's lives and help them to get the kind of things that they need. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. It's so weird to see you all in person.
Yes.
And it's really great. My name is Pat Brown. I've lived in Williston, I think 33, 34 years, somewhere up there we're trying to figure out today, and it's up over 30. How about that? I retired 3 years ago as a director of student life in the Davis Center at UVM. So I was there for 39 years, and part of my retirement is repurposing. So part of my repurposing was to get involved in the community. And I've seen most of you and met most of you in other capacities in the Chittenden Community Forest Committee as well. My interest in being on the board is somehow Krista Lee found me, I don't know where, to sort of do some work. And we did a lot of restorative practice for on campus in dealing with students who misbehaved on campus. So coming to what the Community Justice Center does was not new to me, but clearly a whole different level of interactions and cases and behaviors that we're addressing. So I've been challenged and have enjoyed the process thus far, and really excited to serve on the board, which is a new effort as well, and sort of figure out where that's going to go for the future. So thanks.
Thank you, Pat.
Thanks, Pat. And then our final 3 that we would like to present is Juliet Longchamp, Eveline Killian, and Katie Ticker.
The chair. See familiar faces. Hi, I'm Julie Longchamp, and I'm a resident of Heinsberg, but I'm familiar because I did teach at Williston Central School from 1988 to 2013 before taking my present job, which is working as the Director of Professional Programs at Vermont NEA, which is the Vermont Teachers Union. So I get the privilege of going into lots of schools, working with a lot of educators, and I feel the work that I do there is similar in that I'm an educator, and I feel being on the board and doing this work is also about education and providing second chances. And it's an honor to be asked to be on the board and to be asked to be on the executive council, because I do believe in the work and I do believe in second chances. And it is so powerful to sit on a board and watch somebody transform their lives because of this process and because of caring adults. Many people haven't really experienced that. So I think when we talk about equity and justice, that this is a really important committee to be on. And I'm proud to be a Heinsberg resident and part of it. And I think I'm the only Heinsberg resident on the committee, so hopefully there'll be more. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. I'm Eveline Killian, and I'm from Richmond. And I've been a resident of Richmond for 27 years. I've raised 3 kids, one of whom was in Mr. St. Hilaire's class. It's good to see you.
Good to see you.
I am an architectural engineer and associate principal at a small 13-person engineering company that does energy efficiency in Burlington. And I am an active member in the Richmond Racial Equity group that was started in June of 2020 and have worked on the Richmond policing policies and the value statements of that group. And I've also started a equity group with other engineering firms to work on equity here in our industry, and also an equity group in our internal office. So equity is how I got into this this area, and I just really strongly believe in giving people second chances, not only for themselves, but also for the community, that we can really do something to restore and provide justice to the affected community. And so I'm very privileged, or honored, I should say, to be asked to be on this board, because I really do feel like the strength that Krista Lee and Brenna bring to this organization is just so, it's moving mountains. It's really having an impact on every part of the process, on every impacted party, and with the grace and compassion with which this is done is just everything that restorative justice is about. So I am honored to be part of this panel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Katie Titterton. I live in Richmond. I've been there for 11 years. I am the co-owner of a family communications consulting firm. It's small. And I have 2 young boys, ages 3 and 6. And I have served on this board for the last 5 years. When I joined, I was on a panel with Greta. And this is the most important volunteering I've ever done in my life, and that's why I'm still here. And the mission of restorative justice affects not only the people we serve. I have found it impacts my work, it impacts my parenting. You can see it improve the fabric of our communities. And as a communications consultant, I think there's no substitute for what happens when you get people in a room together and around a table together, and the transformation that can take place. So I am proud to be here and happy to be here, and I am also very excited about the restructuring that's taken place. I think it's going to really advance the work of this group in our communities and the communities that we serve, and also throughout the state. So thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you very much. So, anything else, Krista Lee, before we vote on this?
No, just again, wanted to say thank you for the opportunity. I thought that it was really important to have the folks that we're recommending to fill these slots come before all of you. I know that time is tight this evening, so I would just ask if there's any questions that you have, either of myself or of the people that we are recommending. We would be happy to answer those questions, but moving forward, if there aren't any questions, these are the folks who have shown great interest and who are passionate and dedicated, and I think it would be an honor to work with them, and I think all of the communities that we serve would be really, really enhanced with their participation.
Thank you for giving us the opportunity to reintroduce, or have reintroduced to us, the members that you're recommending. And the board has really always been supportive of the CJC, and will continue to be, I'm sure. So is there any questions before we ask for a motion?
Hopefully real quick, Krista Lee, hi. Could you remind me what the members go through a vetting process? I know the police department reviews and it makes recommendations in addition to you. Could you just explain, it'd be helpful to me to understand what the process was here and what sort of vetting, if you will. That's probably not the best word. It's the only one I can come up with.
Sure.
The 9 got to go through.
Sure. So as any interested party who's interested in joining would go through an interview process with myself, with another member of our team, Brenna, who is our staff member. They also go through a full background check through the Department of Corrections and also a background check through the Williston PD. And they check for, BCIC and child registry to make sure everybody is clear on that. And what we did is we put together a small team of folks, we called kind of our work group, if you will, and we defined really what the executive panel and board would really be responsible for doing. And we put that out to all of the current members of the CJC and people who were waiting to be appointed, and asked who would be interested in that process. And these are the folks who came forward and who have shown, I think, just great passion and dedication to that process. And so we opened it up to all 35 members, and these are the folks who came forward.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Any further questions for Crystal Lee?
I just want to say I'm very pleased to see that you had such a great representation from the serving towns. I know that has been something you've made a really concerted effort to get more representation outside of just Williston. So is that something that was intentional, or was it just, these are the folks that came forward?
Yeah, no, Bob Stafford and I really took a concentrated effort to really want to expand into the service areas that our grant covers, and wanting to make sure that people were educated about restorative justice, the services that were available. And so we put some information out. We did a couple of informational and educational presentations, and folks came forward. And as you heard, Brett Lindemith was also instrumental in bringing some of this forward from Heinsberg, as he had experience from Richmond, and then bringing that into Heinsberg as he started to venture there. So, yeah, thank you. Sure.
Thank you. I'd be looking for a motion.
I'll move to appoint the Community Justice Center members listed on the memo dated July 27th to the Executive Board for the term lengths specified therein.
Second.
Sorry, discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Congratulations to all of you. Keep up the wonderful work.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Let's move on to the noise ordinance variance request, and we will be having Jake Morgeson from the USDA joining us by Zoom. And Eric, if you'd like to lead off where we're at tonight.
Yep. Just one moment, Terry. I just can get Jake connected here. Okay, there we go. Jake's getting connected, but I can update the board. And since the last meeting, the board gave me some homework. I went and gathered some more information on this request. I did 2 field tests of sound decibel levels using the pyrotechnic noise making devices for the bird dispersion. On the 14th, I went to the solid waste district, Green Mountain Compost, and Dan gave me a demonstration at varying distances there, same areas where when the board did the site visit, about 450 feet away, a quarter mile away, and a half mile away. Those readings are listed in your memo. And then last week on the 22nd, Jake, who's connected this evening, assisted me in doing a demonstration at the site that's under consideration for this variance this evening. Avenue B at the Casella facility. What we did there was I observed at 375 feet, a quarter mile, and a half mile. And at the solid waste district, we just used the device called the banger, the louder of the 2. And then on Avenue B, the banger and the screamer were both deployed, and I took readings there. Jake can speak to it this evening, but the USDA's thought is if the use of this is granted, the screamer would likely be the device used with more frequency. To remind the board, the noise decibel threshold in this zoning district is 90 decibels. And then just understanding where this effect may be on different distances in the area. What I did to collect the decibel samples was I found a highly rated application for my phone, and I used that in these areas to record the readings on it. The board had also asked other possible mitigation strategies. In my conversations when I took these readings with Solid Waste District, USDA, the state of Vermont, and Casella, there's a consensus among those groups that having a variety of tools to use to mitigate birds at their facilities was a best practice to use. For example, Solid Waste District, they use these devices with a monofilament grid, a fake eagle, and rubber seagulls. Casella, a noisemaker with a call of a predatory bird is used. Devices to deter roosting on buildings are in place, and they're currently exploring pricing to use a monofilament grid. I also looked to see if there's other data that was collected in other municipalities in South Burlington regarding the noise level, and with multiple inquiries, staff could not find anything. South Burlington didn't have anything available. USDA relayed that this was the first demonstration where they had readings take place with the use of these devices. That's the updated information I have for the board this evening. I'm happy to answer any questions, and we have Jacob connected here for any additional information from the USDA.
Any questions for Eric at this moment?
How far along are they in exploring the monofilament cost and the difficulty of putting that in?
Yeah, I had a conversation with Casella. I wasn't sure, my conversation didn't indicate how far along they were. I just understood they were in a process of obtaining what the pricing may be.
Did any of the other facilities that we've had contact with use just that and the Eagle and that kind of thing? The bangers?
Nope. In terms of what I learned from Solid Waste District and Casella, their other facilities, they use this blended approach, and the pyrotechnic noisemakers were part of that, part of those tools utilized.
Okay.
One question I have, Eric, is I'm looking at, or everyone, is I'm looking at Melinda Scott's memo, July 8th. And in it, she mentions the very end of her memo, she talks about how U.S. Fish and Wildlife need to go through a NEPA-like process if they were to do something like that. So I think my question is for Jake, and the question is does USDA need to go through a similar process, environmental review process, when they are proposing to use I'm going to use the word that's in the memo, to the use of pyrotechnic devices? Does that make sense?
Hey, Jake, did you hear that question? If I see you connected, if you want to try unmuting.
Yeah, I can answer that question, Eric. I do want to thank Eric for coming out and doing some of those readings, because it is valuable information for all of us to have. Like I said, it is the first time, to my knowledge, that at least in the USDA Vermont office, that any decibel levels have been recorded on pyrotechnic utilization. So that's good information for us to have, and I do want to thank him for taking that under his wing. As far as environmental impact goes, and with any sort of NEPA compliance, within our USDA Vermont Wildlife Service office, yes, we follow all certain guidelines for NEPA compliance, and everything that we do, including pyrotechnic utilization throughout the entire state of Vermont, is covered under our current NEPA agreement that we have, which has gone out for public comment not too many years ago at this point. But yes, as a federal agency, we are obligated to be compliant under NEPA, and that covers the entire state of Vermont for our USDA office.
Okay, good, thank you.
Terry, I also see Joe Gay from Casella, who I spoke with about the monofilament, is in in the meeting, and if Ted, if you want me to connect him to any more information on that timeline.
I'm glad that he's on the line as well. Maybe he could answer the questions that were asked.
Yeah, Joe, I think you can hear me. I'm gonna connect you here just a moment. Joe, you just need to unmute and you should be connected here. Oh, there it is. Joe, are you there? Might be something on the audio. I see you're unmuted, Joe. We just can't hear you on our end here. Might be a microphone issue, so I feel like on the radio now. So maybe we'll go back to Joe in a few minutes if we can get him connected.
While we're waiting for Joe, is there any other questions that for Jake?
So my question is really regarding the timing during the day that these may be set off, and wondering the feasibility of restricting the timing of these to outside of business hours, or possibly in consultation with the childcare facilities that are nearby, doing it outside of their operating hours. Would that be feasible? Would it be beneficial, or would that kind of negate the effects and the use of these pyrotechnics being restricted in that way?
You're muted, Jake, if you're there.
I would say we're up for all possibilities as far as, suggestions go, and collaboration with all the partners involved here. I think that is going to limit us quite a bit. As the primary entity involved in this situation, we certainly work primarily a Monday through Friday schedule, which obviously I think would conflict with the primary timeframes of the neighboring daycare facilities, as well as the other industrialized areas of that community area of Williston. As far as the timing goes, with the events of birds, the birds are going to be there primarily as that facility is under operation, which coincides probably closely, I would guess. I'm not sure what the daycare hours are, or the center hours are under normal operations, but I'm guessing that's probably going to conflict with similar scheduling between the two facilities.
Any other questions for Jake at this point? I'm not sure if there's anyone in the room that wishes to make a statement or ask a question regarding the issue. If there is not, is there anyone on the line that wishes to?
Yeah, I've got a couple people on the line, Terry, so I can connect them. First, I have Lauren Bergeron. Lauren, I'm going to connect you here just a moment. Hi,
Hello,
Lauren.
can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi, awesome, thank you. I do have a statement prepared. So I've been a licensed educator at Williston Enrichment Center for the past 5 years, and our Early Learning Center celebrates its 20th anniversary this summer. And I'm currently even looking for homes in the Williston area with my husband. Tonight, unfortunately, I would really like to object to the use of these devices across the street from my classroom and the classrooms of very young infants to 5-year-olds. Ultimately, there are children who are with us for more than half of their waking hours per week in the years which 90% of their brain development occurs. In opposing to this tonight, it's not that I have not considered the information that has been gathered even within this past week. Although I can't help but feel shook by the fact that children have once again been left out of the equation, and I feel responsible to give a voice for them. Again, there are over 200 children in less than a half-mile radius on a given day. I must highlight that there is serious danger on both sides of the equations here. And I ask that you continue to seek and work towards other mitigation measures. As educators, it pains us to see what our children are already going through. I believe we have a renowned teaching team, but often we are the only spot left for a parent to put their child in care, or with it being the very busy work area that it is, we're the closest to their work. With our field and our industry struggling, we're already in fear of appearing political or deterring business by speaking up about the noise pollution that's already present in our area. But with being post-COVID, we are down 3 classrooms and nearly half the size that we used to run it as a center. The lack of funding and the dire need in the field leaves us at a great risk. I understand that after the testing from last week, it may seem silly to keep dwelling on this issue. In the future, it could be considered to better connect earlier and have us a part of this conversation sooner so we could talk through some of these details. With half of the state's childcare for birth to 5 not reopening after the pandemic, we'd love to be considered an asset to the town of Williston. Despite the decibel levels being similar to the decibel levels of the traffic nearby, I need to highlight that it is more complex than simply considering the detail of the decibels. Children will always hear the cars and the trucks throughout their entire life, and the youngest children will learn to form those sounds and words, and sometimes even their first sentences, off of the joys of what we observe from the rooming and the zooming and the wee-oo-wee-oos of the traffic that's nearby us. We utilize a lot of that in our learning environment, even to scaffold what we've seen with a truck or an 18-wheeler to build the symbolic play that helps to build a better cognitive base. But it is loud, but the sounds are expected in the eyes of a child. Instead of debating the particularity of the volume here when we are with the decibel levels, I really want to consider the part of it being expected versus it being unexpected, because exposure to the unexpected over time can cause damage because of the fear response that's occurring. Perceptions in the unknown, threat to physical safety, and incongruence in the environment are 3 of the 4 threats that the brain is constantly and automatically wired to scan for. And in reaction to these events, will release the cortisol that acts as the flight or fight response. Continuous release of this cortisol damages our hippocampus. So what I'm asking is that you ask yourself to consider more than just the simplicity of the noise pollution, but more the impact of the neurobiology on our youngest citizens in the town. What will this impact have on the future of your community? There are children in every classroom that take an average of 15 to 30 minutes to recover after the jets pass by us. At many times, leaves teachers covered with upset and in distress children, and all care and learning activities go to a halt out of the blue. What fear will be caused in the eyes of a child by the pyrotechnics? This will impair learning and development, including speech, language, and language-related skills, such as reading. Thank you for considering this additional voice. I could have started this with a list of other qualifications I have, a nearly completed master's in education, or 500 hours of training on this topic in the past 5 years, but I really wanted to center this around trying to put ourselves into the shoes of the children when we're balancing and considering what we could do and what other possibilities there are. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. Is there somebody else who wishes to speak?
Yep, got a couple more folks with their hands up. Courtney Howard, I see you next. I'm going to connect you right now.
Oh, great. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, great. Thanks, Lauren, for speaking up on behalf of the children. I spoke, I don't know, a few weeks ago, a mother of a toddler who attends EJ's Kids Club. And thank you for doing all the follow-up and the testing with the noise and the decibel levels and so forth. I have a quicker point than this meeting, and that is I like the suggestion a lot of working around some of the business hours. And while that may not be totally feasible, I also think that if these are to be discharged, then we need to really consider discharging on the weekends when businesses are not in session, because obviously there are consultancies and all kinds of other businesses operating along that road. So even if you could take those 2 full days, Saturday and Sunday, and run the pyros then, that would be 2 more days of saving the kids from being frightened, interrupting learning and so on, and then also interrupting the businesses as well. So I'm a big fan of dispersing them on, non-traditional business hours and pulling that into the weekend. And that's all I've got. So thank you.
Thank you.
See, next I have Matt. I saw you in the chat, so I'll just find you here. Looks like we're having a tech issue, Matt. I apologize. It's not letting me connect your audio on Zoom here. If you want to type your comment in the chat, we can certainly read it that way. Next I have a Christina. 1 second, Christina.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Hi, this is Christina Gusty. I also spoke last time, another parent of a child at EJ's Kids Club and Williston resident. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to join until 8, so I missed most of the discussion tonight. But I liked some of the comments that were just made, and was also wanted to ask if you did grant this temporary variance, if there could be any constraints added to the variance, like a cap on number of times per day they could be used, or, I think that was just a great suggestion that was made about, certain times of the day or certain days of the week being added to that variance to minimize the impact for these daycare centers and all the children that are in such close proximity. So thanks for considering those, additional constraints.
Thank you. Anyone else on the line?
The last person I have is Kate. Kate, I'll get you connected. Whoops. Wrong person, sorry, Jill. I threw my mouse up tonight. It's a little easier with my mouse. A lot of people in the chat. There we go.
Hey there. My name is Kate Mattina, and I'm also a parent of a child who goes to Williston Enrichment Center. And I'm just like to echo what I heard Lauren say about the fact that the predictability piece is such a big one. I'm also a teacher, an elementary school teacher in Burlington, and just know how important being able to predict things are for children. And, a big issue with the other noise from the F-35s is that, we don't know when they're going to fly and how much stress that it causes. And as I sit here on my back porch and it's been these hazy days in our area and these beautiful sunsets from the wildfires, and, we hear the noise coming overhead most of the summer. I just really urge you to think about what kind of community we want to live in, and thinking about the noise ordinance and the decibel levels and the unpredictability of the sound. What do we want for our children to learn in, and for, our teachers to teach in? And I hope that, I know that it's an important problem to solve, and I don't deny that, but I hope we can continue to think about the monofilaments or other solutions, timing of the explosions, so that it doesn't add that other layer of stress to the children and the teachers and the people who work within earshot of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that the end of the people on the Zoom?
Yep. I
Okay.
have no more comments on Zoom.
I'd just like to add that on the July 22nd testing that was done, I also was able to listen a little bit. For those of you who don't know, I live probably about 1/10 of a mile from EJ's daycare center, with the woods in between me and there, and probably 2/10 to maybe a little over 2/10 to the facility on Avenue B. And so I was interested to hear what I could hear from my back deck. And I could hear the bang from the bird bangers pretty clearly, not excessive noise, but when I was on the back deck, I could not hear the screamer if it went off at that point. And inside the house, I heard the second one as just a little blip type of thing. So I decided it only takes me about 2 minutes to get to the daycare center. So I was over there for the next round of shots. If a screamer was used, I never heard it. The bang was probably less than there was on my back deck, but the thing that impressed me more probably was when I parked my car directly across from the daycare center on Avenue D. There was a truck in the parking lot right next to my car that was doing a lot of backing up, and of course, with the beep, 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 which was louder and certainly longer in duration than the shots. And if this is going on all day, or at least part of the day, it makes a big difference. There's a whole lot of noise that goes on in that because it's an industrial area. As I was turning around, it was followed out by a tractor trailer truck. So there's a lot more going on there, which most of the people have said that they recognize that there's a lot of noise in that neighborhood. So any other further questions on the subject for Jake or for anyone else? If not, if we're ready to take a vote on it, there is a suggested motion that would need to have some time limit put on it. If we don't have a motion, we'll be bringing this back again at our next meeting, so.
I don't see where the language for the motion would be. I'm not sure I would be making the motion. Where?
So, top of page 2.
Not particularly a draft language, but just rather a suggestion. Should the board craft a motion, the duration would be a suggestion for that motion.
So just a point of order, if you will, if a motion is not made, one option would be, not option, but if nobody feels comfortable making a motion, this automatically comes back to us next week? Is that?
At some point in time, it'll be back because we don't have a decision on it. We need, if we have a motion, we can either vote it up or vote it down.
Okay.
At least we have a decision.
Then you have a
made
decision.
at
Okay.
that point.
All right, just want to be clear.
Yep. And remind you that the Conservation Commission did vote to approve the variance, but with a 1-year limit.
The thing that's causing me pause over all of this is the fact this seems to be the first line of action that they're doing. There are other things that, and They haven't been tried yet. Now, you know, if this is, those other things are only done in conjunction with the noisemakers, that might change my opinion, although it might not change my opinion if that's just because, well, that's what we always do. If, you know, I hearken back to about 7 or 8 years ago with Richmond had a issue with blueberry farm on Richmond Hill, and the select board there, and I know this as a former Richmond boy, the select board was confronted with the neighbors being very upset because they were sending off loud cannon sounds. It's not this, but they were doing it to scare off the birds, so the birds would eat the blueberries. And the one of the people actually recorded it in a reasonably good system, and then it goes off every like 10 minutes, and he was in the select board meeting and he played his recording. So every 10 minutes there would be the sound of a cannon going off in the select board meeting. And his point was well made that, you know, would you want that to be going on? I guess what I'm thinking is if there is another way around this, I would want to know if there is. And if there isn't, then I might be inclined to a test period. I don't think it'd be for a year. It'd probably be for less time than that. But that's where I'm coming from, because I would like to see this done more incrementally. And I do understand that the decibels are not, don't seem to be massive. But, you know, I'd still like to know more about whether an incremental approach can be done. If this is the cheapest way for them to do it, and that's a legitimate business thought, legitimate business goal. But if it comes at the expense of neighbors when there is another affordable way to do it that would be just as or close to as productive at taking care of the problem, then I would say no to the ordinance change. And right now I'm not ready to. I don't know the answer to that question.
My big thing is not just kind of the duration. It's back to, you know, Ted's line and Greta earlier. Just some type of a schedule possibly. I know we can't control the population of the birds and when they're going to be there at the exact moment in time, but I know, you know, it's an industrial area, as Terry said. Businesses start early, sometimes as early as 7 or 7:30. And that's usually before, you know, maybe a daycare is fully up and running. You know, they have scheduled breaks, max, something that they could have preparatory to prepare for these unexpecteds. That's educational language that we deal with a lot at school. And I think this is, yeah, I'm not comfortable. And I know I read that earlier with 1 year. I think that's a long time. And I just think there's possibly some other options and or schedules that could be looked at. And that's my opinion, but yeah, I'm just not comfortable with this right now.
I think I'm in the same place as both Ted and Gordon in terms of, I feel at this point there are other methods for bird mitigation that have not been fully explored, including the monofilament, and would not feel comfortable granting variance without those other methods having been explored fully. And then if we were to grant a variance at some point in the future, you know, if those methods had also then been unsuccessful, I would want to know that, you know, that a schedule had been worked out, and that, again, you know, as Gordon said, something, you know, in conjunction with the facilities that are in the area, you know, to mitigate the effects on the children too.
So is there more information we can gather then in the next several weeks then from Casella and from USDA?
I'm not I might, if the board wants a couple more minutes to see if Jake has any additional information to share on those points, or I can certainly follow up with him after this meeting and see if there's anything additional.
Sounds to me like we would like to put this on hold at least for probably a few more weeks to get more information.
Okay, I'll have another conversation and see what we can put together.
So I'm liking the idea of postponing a decision. My concern is in a couple weeks or whenever we take it up again, we're going to be essentially in the same situation. We're not going to have information that clearly leads us to a yes or no type answer, either individually or as a group. The big concern for me here is the childcare facilities. They're located in a noisy place to start with, Avenue or off of Industrial Avenue, zoned industrial. And what I'll probably never be able to understand, at least enough to make a decision, is what is the impact of this additional noise on those kids? If we're looking for information that would probably help me come up with a yes or no vote, that's it. I just really doubt that information is available. I guess with that, sometimes my thinking happens as I talk. So as I'm talking, it's leading me to conclude that this is probably a case where I'll have to be conservative and say no, because I just don't know what the answer is to that impact, to that legitimate use in that zoned area, on their key clients and people who are particularly vulnerable.
It would probably be a multiple-year study to study the effects of the noise that occurs right now than if we were to allow a variance to see what the difference would be in another year. So, yeah. At any rate, I think we're at the end of our discussion period for tonight on this subject, and we'll move on to the stormwater maintenance agreement with the Bittersweet Homeowners Association and Christine Doherty, wastewater stormwater coordinator, is here tonight to talk about this.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, fellow Select Board members. Christine Doherty, stormwater coordinator here. I am bringing forward today a stormwater agreement that would like your support and approval on. Essentially, what is the memo had stated, the state has made a determination that the town owning impervious surface within the permitted boundaries of Bittersweet HOA community, that we should be listed as a co-permittee on their general operating stormwater discharge permit. And in doing so, we are in doing this agreement and asking for this agreement to be in place, we're essentially putting into writing what our practice and our policy has been historically. But given the nature of having to be in a permitted situation with the state agency, we felt it was critical to have these understandings spelled out and the boundaries of responsibility clearly delineated, which this agreement would do.
Any questions for Christine regarding the proposal?
What's the difference between who is going to be responsible for what going forward is broken down in the agreement? And I was wondering what the differences between maintenance, the routine maintenance that the town will be solely responsible for, and any other kind of maintenance.
So if I understood the question correctly, we're trying to get some clarification on differences between maintenance that the town would be responsible for and other generally categorized maintenances of the stormwater treatment practices. Right, so these systems are constructed of usually different segments. The town right-of-way contains primarily the stormwater pipe under the roadways and the catch basins along those roadways. The town maintains those, cleans those out. Other portions of the system would be like catch basins, the actual outfall structures, and those lie on the HOA's common land and would be the responsibility of the HOA. If the town gets involved with maintenance and things of that on those properties, then we need additional agreements and maintenance, maintenance agreements and access easements, excuse me. And I think it will cloud the permitting requirements and who's responsible for what actions if we don't have that separation.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Christine, what might be helpful is to understand, a couple of years ago, we went through a whole somewhat contentious process of determining that the town of Williston would take over homeowner associations' stormwater systems if they brought them up to current standards. And in fact, I believe we are now the permit holder for those systems. Different permit is my understanding. This is a 3-acre permit, which is different than the stormwater permits we were talking about then. So my question is what is the difference? And maybe just as importantly is, how many of these 3-acre stormwater permits do we expect in Williston? I assume the number might be huge. And will we have to be and what would be your understanding of how many of them we would have to be co-permittees on?
Yeah, right. So these are great questions, but they're really, each question is addressing different categories within the stormwater permitting framework, okay? And I'll try to break it down and separate them out a little to help answer your question. The 3-acre permit, as it's known, as it's referred to, is a general permit for discharging stormwater, required for properties that actually contain less than 3 acres of impervious surface, but the state enrolled into this new operational permit the 3-acre permit requirements that were required to be developed and implemented per the state statutes. So that's the 3-acre permit, and then we have this operational permit. Now, we're not being asked to participate as a permittee, as a co-permittee on this permit, Bittersweet HOA permit, because it's a 3-acre site. We're being asked to participate because we have taken over the roads within the community. And so as the agency or the entity with operational control over those roads, we're being directed to take more of a legal responsibility, more of a firmer position in that responsibility. But we want to keep our responsibility limited to that which we own and operate and maintain. So that's where this agreement is coming forward. And I, again, want to separate that from the new 3-acre stormwater discharge permit, because that is going to have impacts to our community members here and some of the HOAs. What happened historically when we were helping, when we helped other HOA communities developing and bringing up their systems to speed, we helped with things like getting grants for those improvements and getting them to meet the current discharge standards. A couple of significant differences between that program and what's occurring here is we're not seeking to take over the entire permits or the entire stormwater infrastructure systems in this request. Rather, this request is to try to limit our permit liability and risk to only our areas of operational control. When we did take over the stormwater systems under the Allen Brook Flow Restoration Plan, that was a targeted effort by the state to really focus on discharges that were within the Allen Brook watershed. The standards for meeting that for those permit requirements were very specific to just the Allen Brook. The 3-acre rule, as where it was referenced earlier, is a general permit, so it applies to the state, all permit operators in the state. So the impact is much broader. And so to answer your question of how many communities may be potentially impacted in the town of Williston, I unfortunately don't have that number directly. It is I estimate it to be around 15 to 20 likely communities that would be impacted by that. But the extent to those impacts and how they're going to be impacted is going to be so unique from one community to the other, because they're going to have to make an assessment of what infrastructure is currently in place, how that measures to the discharge standards established by the state, and if upgrades are needed, to what extent those upgrades are needed to meet the state permit requirements. So it's, I hope that helps to explain how those are really kind of separated aspects to this bigger question of stormwater.
So if I could just quickly repeat it back to you to make sure I kind of got a clear difference between the 3-acre permit rule, whatever, and the previous Allen Brook, the permits that were issued under the Allen Brook Restoration Plan.
Yes, please.
And it makes sense to have a different town to take a different approach with the 3 acres than it did with the Allen Brook related permits. Your guesstimate is, and it, maybe ballpark only, is that there's 15 or 20 of these that are going to need to get permitted through the 3-acre rule. Right now, you can't determine what type of an agreement, if any, not agreement, if Williston will need to be able to be, will have to be involved in any of those 3-acre permit, the 15 or 20 that your crystal ball suggests we'll be seeing in the future. So we just have to wait till you come back to us in the future.
No, I can say that, with some confidence, there's 3 or 4 that the state, that we're going to be tied to as co-permittees, right? Okay. But being a 3-acre permit, it really is no different than being under an operational permit in all practical aspects. You still have discharge limits, which are being established by that permit. If you have a receiving water body that has, restricted discharge allocations to it, then your discharges would have to meet those specific receiving water restrictions. The 3-acre rule, where it really starts to take application is when we start to look at what those discharges, those permitted discharges are going to be. And we're looking at measurements of your phosphorus and, what needs to be implemented to meet these discharge limits. So if you have 3 acres or more, you have a higher standard that you need to meet. You have, you have to reduce your load more than you would if you had a smaller site. It's seen as potentially a bigger impact because of the amount of impervious that comes off of an isolated area. It creates essentially a small hot spot, if you will, of pollutants, of potential pollutants. So going back to the co-permittee in question at hand, there's and what we're looking at for 3-acre permits, we are co-permittees on several permits which do have 3 acres or more of impervious surfaces, and we are capturing that and phosphorus reductions associated at a higher rate because of that. But again, that's going to be a separate issue.
Okay.
I know that we'll likely be continuing to talk about the 3-acre rule and the impacts of that to the communities further down, over the next probably year and a half, as communities start to have to face those. What I can say now is one of the big differences that we'll be looking at between communities that have to make upgrades to meet the 3-acre permit requirements and what our community members face when trying to meet the Allen Brook flow restoration plan discharge requirements is really going to be the timeline on that. So with the Allen Brook flow restoration plan, there was almost a 30-year time period to bring all these systems up to speed and to meet the standards. And the state is not giving that kind of a timeline for this 3-acre permit. I think a lot of that, again, is because most facilities won't have to make any significant changes to meet the permit requirements. It'll be older facilities that maybe have been gotten around some of those permitting requirements in the past, that have outdated systems that maybe need to be upgraded, things like that. So the actual impact, I think, is going to be kind of spread out and consistent. It'd be hard for to say specifically. But it will be a shorter time. Here on the state's website, they do say that, just to give you some idea of the timeline, that landowners will have about 18 months to do an engineering analysis, and then they'll have 5 years to implement the approved plan. Again, that timeline's a lot shorter than the 30 years that we had with the Allenbrook Flow Restoration Plan, and the impacted, potentially impacted, operators are much broader, being that this is a statewide regulation permit change versus just the Allenbrook Flow Restoration watershed.
Okay. This is a difficult question to ask, so I apologize if I ask it in a blunt way. Would a homeowners association such as Bittersweet have a legitimate argument if they said, hey, wait a second, other homeowner associations, when we brought our system up to state standards, the town took over their systems and took over the permit. Why isn't that being offered to us?
Right. So that's a fair question, Terry. I don't know that I have a good answer for that. To me, I don't know that taking over minutes of these systems as an MS4 is really the best idea in managing and keeping a stormwater program and the fees associated at a reasonable level. As you start to take over these systems, and one of the challenges that I think we will face if we start to go in that direction is going to be significant costs associated with it. As you can see, the state continues to make changes to their permits. That uncertainty of permit requirements being, possibly changed every 5 years can really make that pretty impactful from a cost and management perspective. Currently, our MS4 program manages around 30 different facilities of stormwater treatment practices throughout the town, throughout our MS4 program. That runs our program pretty thin, to be honest, and it takes a lot of resources to do so. We are going to be looking at significant cost for maintaining and upgrading the systems, which we do have. I think over the next couple of years to meet the phosphorus control plan requirements that we are currently facing and required and subject to meeting. So, the reason why this is being brought forward the way that it is, in the direction that it is, because we feel it's going to be in the best interest of the program, meet the program's objectives, keep the program as it is, the best that we can, without having to really look at significant expansions and increases in fee structures to meet those demands if we were to do that.
My interest isn't in the town taking on additional responsibility and cost. It's more focused on, I'm going to use the word, an equity question between homeowner associations. Not between homeowners associations, but with homeowner associations might be a way to put that. Because of decisions made in the past about how we would handle the restoration related permits.
Sure, and it's a little bit difficult for me to really speak too directly to the processes of the Allenbrook Flow Restoration Plans. I wasn't here for that, but what I can say is that that was not without a lot of effort, a lot of resources to do that. What was done, and thankfully, I would say it was probably at a small scale and very targeted. What we're looking at with a 3-acre permit and the potential implications of that permit are much broader and impact, everything from industrial developments to residential. Yeah.
My focus would only be on the residential, the homeowner associations, the industrials, commercial, non-residential. for lack of better words, they're on their own.
Sure.
Yeah, okay, all right. Thank you.
Any further questions for Christine? If not, there is a motion suggested regarding this.
Move to authorize the town manager to enter into a stormwater system maintenance agreement with the Bittersweet Homeowners Association.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion?
I am, I'm not ready to move ahead on this, myself, just personally. I feel this question of, are we treating homeowner associations, again, these are crass words, these aren't delicately phrased, treating them differently. And that's of issue, concern, whatever to me. So, and because I don't know the answer to that or how I feel what I believe the answer to that is, I'm not ready to vote tonight. Others may be, so I will abstain.
So we do have a motion made and seconded. Any further discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay, and those abstaining, there are just one, Jeff. So we're moving on then to Taft Corners Form-Based Code Vision Plan. And welcome to all of the Planning Commission members that are here tonight. Sorry, we're running a little bit late, but we've
Just a little.
not unusual, but we have set aside about an hour to discuss this, and so I think we'll turn this over to Matt Belanger.
Thank you. Thank you for your time tonight to talk about this project in Williston. I'd like, before I get started, to just recognize I have a couple of Planning Commission members and other project partners in the room tonight, and probably some attending virtually as well. Kate Lamar from the Planning Commission, Chair Megan Cope, Vice Chair Chapin Kaner, and Taylor Newton from the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission, who's really been our staff lead there, and thank them for their attendance tonight and all their efforts on this project. Jeffrey Farrell, our consultant lead, is attending via Zoom, and there may be some other Planning Commission members on board via Zoom as well. I have my phone on the counter here because I asked them to text me if they're having any trouble getting through or want to be recognized or speak.
Matt, I've got Jeff Farrell, Alex Daly, Ron Bomer, and Jill Pardini connected.
Terrific. I'm glad they could be here. So I want to start tonight. The goal for tonight and the goal that lies ahead of us on this project is to move from the public input and visioning stage of this project to what we call the coding stage of this project. You've seen the vision document. You know that it expresses a broad set of goals and touches on a number of different things that the town interacts with. The part of the project that our goal is to move on to is the land use development standards that will be part of fulfilling this vision. So to do that, we want to have this time to check in with the Select Board and the Planning Commission about what they see in this vision. You have some materials from us. You have the most recent version of the vision document that also contains the workshop report, which explains our public process and various parties who were interviewed, town department stakeholders, et cetera, as part of that process, and then articulates the complete vision for Taft Corners as understood by our consultant in developing that process. You have received an executive summary listing off some of the changes and revisions that have been made to the vision, as there's been a cycle of feedback with the Planning Commission since our public outreach efforts and the first draft of that vision. And you have a more recent memorandum from the Planning Commission describing 4 particular areas of sort of friction or concern, with some attempt to contextualize those in terms of where are we dealing with some of just the realities that Williston's facing, where are there things that we're concerned about, but we know that when we get into the coding phase of the project, we'll be able to address them, and we want to make sure that we do, and where are there still some things that might need to be resolved. So to the select board as you read these various documents, as you think about those friction points. Tonight would be a good night to identify any others or provide insight to the planning commission around that. I'm going to be really brief, and I'll probably be deferring to some of the commission members or consultant team for some of the answers tonight. But we're at a critical point in the project where our really big goal here is to move on and develop those land use standards, because as you probably noticed around town, development's not waiting for us. So if there are things in here that are seen as desirable, it makes sense to spend our energy moving on with that coding exercise. So I'll stop there. I'll open it up and fire away. Let me know where you want to start.
Who would like to be first?
Is there,
Anyone?
I guess I should ask it from the standpoint of, is there a structure for this question answer to happen?
The floor is wide open, I think, for any question you wish to ask, and hopefully we'll have an answer.
So I'm on page 12, and it was the hands-on design workshop that happened on the 24th of April. And I'm looking at the part that says what the citizens say. So my question, and I'm going to preference that with I think everybody, most Williston residents could probably look at a part of Taft's Corners and say, geez, wouldn't it be nice if instead of what got built there, this got built there? And this is what we're hearing as some of what the residents want to see at Taft's Corners. So my question is, how does form-based, and what excites me about form-based code is it provides an opportunity for those changes to happen. I guess my question is how, and what is the incentive? Because Williston isn't going to be doing the actual funding of the changes. It's going to be developers or property owners. What is the incentive that pushes them to come up with a vision that the residents are more interested in versus maybe what the economic model they're pursuing says is the right thing to do? Does that make sense?
I think so. Let me try to start answering, and let me know if I'm getting there.
Sure.
So the form-based code as a project, including not just the land use development standards and not just the regulating plan or the map of street types that would be the main work products for the Planning Commission, there's a lot more in here. You can think of it as a comprehensive plan for Taft Corners. In fact, we'd anticipate eventually adopting a version of this into the comprehensive plan.
Cool.
So it provides a whole lot of organizing principles. There's a section towards the back of this plan before the appendix called overarching issues that starts to talk about some of those, and some of the maps in the appendix inform this a little bit as well. Some of what you see in what the citizens said is about wanting mixed use, wanting more housing, wanting changes from auto-centric to people-centric. Well, those things are a lot about buildings and streets, which is where the coding exercise is going to go. But some of the things that we heard were about community spaces, green spaces, public spaces, reutilizing parking areas and big box areas, et cetera. And some things that a land use code can certainly enhance, but it won't get the town there all by itself. So within this plan, especially when we talk about green spaces, creating opportunities for those community spaces, things like that, it probably won't work if the approach is to say to the developer community, you do it. There will be some need for partnership here. Another regulatory item that will work in concert with this is our official map, which is another project we've been working on by which the town can identify critical public lands that are not today public, but the town feels it needs to be. So some of your green spaces, some of your important street connections and layouts would be contained in that. And an official map at the end of the day is only as good as the town's will to actually put it to use. In other words, when a development comes in and the developer says, I'm going to put my access street here, are you ready to say, well, no, the official map says it needs to be here, because that makes your development of a piece of this, 987 acre multi-owner master planned growth center. So am I getting in the right direction for you?
I think so. And I know I like the concept, but I don't have enough knowledge to know what it is specifically in this that will cause me to like it, the understanding, the foundation. And I guess maybe one question out there is there a simple, concrete, no pun intended, example of form-based code versus, is it use-based code? Is that a good way to describe our current ordinance?
There's a spectrum. And somewhere along that spectrum, what we do in Taft Corners lives. We do have a lot of what we would call performance standards. If you want to build, you need to do this or that other thing. We call it the 5 of 9 in Taft Corners. You have to pick 5 of 9 elements to provide on your site. And so an example I can provide of the end result of a performance standards-based code would be what we call the Lot 30 project, Panera Bread, Verizon Wireless, Aspen Dental. That's a project that had to meet those performance standards in Taft Corners. It includes multiple uses. It includes wide sidewalks, public art, small urban park, and multiple stories. And so it ticks the boxes. But one of the things, I was here, I participated in the review and approval of that project. One of the things that's interesting about that project is it has some shortcomings in terms of attempting to be a street frontage along Route 2A, which is 165 feet of right-of-way or something like that. And it's challenging. The buildings were built. They have some architectural value to them. They have that wide sidewalk between their street front and Route 2A and a green belt. And they have entrances that face Route 2A. They address that street. And every one of those entrances from time to time has a little note taped on it that says, don't come in this way, the door's locked. Because where do people come in? They come in from the parking lot. And on that parking lot frontage is this small street, Merchants Row, that was constructed as part of that project. It has parallel parking, it has sidewalks, but it just has big curb cuts into the parking lot. You wouldn't be walking along Merchants Row and necessarily feel invited into those buildings. And so as that project was reviewed and developed, and as I've kind of walked around it and thought about it, I've thought maybe the opportunity for a streetscape in that scenario was actually on Merchants Row rather than Route 2A. I don't know if I'm right about that. But the tool that exists to organize buildings along streets, regardless of ownership or sort of who's developing when, is the regulating plan. And the regulating plan is foundational to the form-based code. So when you look at other streets in Taft Corners, either existing or proposed to be extended in some cases like Wright Avenue, and that's one of the visualizations you have there, thinking about, well, we'd like to make this street a place. That takes more than just being able to tick the boxes of those performance standards. It takes the organizing principles that live in something like a form-based code. And also it means that, that multiple owners may come in and develop at different times with different goals. But if they can all meet that standard, it becomes a place without having necessarily to have been all designed and developed at once.
Okay. You mentioned Route 2A. Is it possible for the presence, and I don't ever see them going away, of Route 2 and 2A it seems like the volume of traffic on those roads and the need for that 165-foot right-of-way to handle that volume of traffic is always going to be, I don't know what the right word is, a barrier is always going to be an obstacle that's going to make it hard for instance, Taft's Corners to feel pedestrian friendly. Are those two roads showstoppers, or are they something that, yeah, they're not great, but we can work around them?
More of the latter. There's some examples in the vision.
I remember.
So, you know, there's an image of a sort of a more boulevard type conversion of Route 2A in there. It's not one of the areas the consultant team selected to focus on as remaking it into a classic American Main Street. But within that right-of-way of Route 2A, there's a ditch section on either side, a very sort of rural highway kind of configuration. And then those wide sidewalks or bike paths. So there are ways to work in Route 2A, and you see some of that in the vision. On Route 2, we actually had a more vigorous conversation about the eastern end of Route 2 from Taft Corners past Healthy Living and Maple Tree Place. Excuse me, and whether that should be a Main Street type configuration. Our consultant team recommended to focus on some of the smaller streets, mostly based on the newness of the development along that corridor. You know, then Healthy Living is a nice building, but back of house faces Route 2. There's a portion of that building that, you know, doesn't have a lot of windows, doesn't have a lot of character. The Shaw's parking lot may be the Shaw's parking lot for some time. There's a wetland adjacent to that our team felt was a little more challenging to deal with. That said, there was some disagreement about that on the Planning Commission, and I think at least some words that the town does want to continue to pursue the pedestrianization or making more humane of those state highways is a goal. And, you know, we did have preliminary conversations with folks from VTrans about how should we address these if these are the town's goals. And, you know, the answer is largely, well, pursue taking them over. Make them Class 1 highways, take them over as other municipalities have done with state highways within their boundaries. And there are some price tags that come with that, some maintenance liabilities and some other things. And there's also a sense that maybe today, as opposed to 20 or 30 years ago, there's more willingness on the part of VTrans to do some things to those rights of way without the town having to take them over. So, you know, not so much a land use development or coding issue, but a definite component of the vision here, and something for the board to think about. If you imagine this as part of your comprehensive plan, what sort of work plan does that lay out in terms of the town interacting with the state agency over the next many, many years, if it's a stated goal to calm those state highways in some way? Okay.
Chapin?
You want to use the mic, please?
Hi, Chapin Kaner from the Planning Commission, and if I could point you, Jeff and others, to the memo that Matt sent on page 5, because I was hoping we'd wind up here anyway, in the sense that it says phasing and the role of town government, which is probably an area of concern for you. And under the facts to consider, the third fact, to make the area a place, there must be significant public coordination and support, such as municipal stormwater shared between properties, and purchase and maintenance of public spaces, as we already do for streets. It's basically the cost of density. There's a complexity cost when you have density and you need more services. Trash can't just be left on the curbside the same. You wind up with more maintenance and more services when you have more density. And to me, that's an important area for you as a select board to think about what direction you want to give us in working on this. The example of Route 2A or Route 2 is a huge one, and I'd rather maybe think about smaller ones first. And for instance, what you wind up with is you wind up with a Cottonwood crossing and a Finning crossing and a Taft Farms. You wind up with a developer's sort of concept of how their thing is, and their stormwater is all within their land and everything. And what we're trying to talk about here is, do we want something that has some more uniformity, some more feeling of place as a whole? And if you want to achieve that, you need a certain amount of density and a certain amount of municipal involvement. And that has costs and a lot of other things. And so I really think the role of the town and how Taft Corners evolves is an important one. Do we want to keep having each developer do their own thing in their own style, or do we want something a little more comprehensive? And that's what really, to me, that's what this is about.
Just an interesting observation. There are these two developments with crossing in their names, but it's difficult to actually cross between them. So, sorry, and I don't mean to dominate, please, others. Let's pick on, the Walmart, Home Depot hypothetical. We know they're immensely popular in terms of shoppers, people going there. They're a huge destination. But, they are not what you would consider downtown-ish. Pedestrian friendly, that type of thing. So help me understand how form-based code can help achieve these goals for that type of property. Does that make sense, that question?
Yeah, a couple of things to pick on Walmart and Home Depot for a minute. If you look at the very last map in the appendix, the character areas map, and hopefully you have one that's color. Walmart and Home Depot are mapped in this area called TC Big Commerce. So these character areas, they're not really quite zoning districts, but they're acknowledgements a little bit of what the situation is on the ground and where these various components of the growth center fall along sort of the evolutionary spectrum. So, we're recognizing we have a part of the growth center that's built out suburban residential and is likely not going to be sort of marked for a whole lot of change from that. It's there, it's built out, it's not likely to evolve. And we have some areas with some focus. The orange core, Taft Corners Flex core area, and then the sort of the general retail around that. So big boxes will evolve because some of them, not Walmart and Home Depot, are in that core. Walmart and Home Depot might evolve too, but with their remoteness, their proximity to the highway, the sort of large lot nature of the site, it's not an area that's identified as critically for that evolution as some of the areas that are more central to the growth center. Doesn't mean we won't, address them, but they're probably going to be there for a while. They might transition from retail to a more warehouse sort of configuration in the short term. We do have adjacent and around them, though, a number of areas identified as natural areas. So you see some green there in half of the Harvest Lane circle adjacent to Home Depot and Walmart property. We have some natural features, some streams and wetlands there. And so we can use some of that undeveloped land around them to also provide a transitional area and some green space opportunities. And, to be clear, when I'm talking about this, I'm talking about land that somebody else owns, not the town of Williston, and that needs to be thought about and planned for, and all of those other things, including possibly purchased. But that was the thinking around specifically Walmart and Home Depot. But there are other big boxes you can think of, the, AC Moore, Marshall's area, Bed Bath & Beyond, PetSmart, et cetera, that are in that core area where a code will likely anticipate more evolution and more, bringing of buildings to the street.
Okay. So Taft Corners is primarily retail, although we made efforts to try to make it a mixed use, but I think it's fair to say it's primarily retail. And with that comes large parking lots. which is, you know, it's kind of one of those, you know, the spiral, downward spiral. You need the large parking lots to support the retail, but it's the large parking lots that create an image, you know, a feel, that type of thing. How is that addressable? And can form-based code help there?
Yeah, you know, part of it is about where the parking lot goes. Some of it is about reducing the parking lot size in exchange for street parking or structured parking or shared parking. These are, you know, tools we've engaged to some degree in Williston already. And you know, you can certainly see a difference between the healthy living parking lot and, you know, I don't know, it's a different scale, but the Hannaford parking lot or something like that, in terms of design, size, pedestrian islands, shade trees, et cetera. But a lot of it's going to be about that location. So, you know, my imagining Merchants Row as becoming a pedestrian-friendly street hinges on basically flipping the parking lot from one side of the site to the other. And then you have to deal with a parking lot that's fronting on Route 2A, and how are you planning on handling that? That's another coding challenge. But you do see in the transmittal memo from the Planning Commission discussion of parking as a friction point. It's going to be a long, slow evolution from the kind of demand we see today to something different. Williston will continue to be a regional shopping hub for a lot of the life of this plan. A lot of the new potential exists in terms of residential growth, and that comes from the market discussion in this plan. So it's gonna transition. We'll want to think about recognizing how we would address, you know, a large single tenant retailer wanting to come in under this plan, and to what extent can we right size that parking and get it in the right spot on the site.
Okay. You hit upon a pretty interesting, you know, concept, which is, you know, as we all know, retail is changing. And I have no idea where it's going. Is form-based code flexible so that as society changes, so that, you know, the code is adaptable to that? Maybe I'm using bad descriptions there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, the first part is the focus is on form. So where is the building on the site? What does the building look like along that public realm, along that street frontage? What's in the building is less important if we get the form right. Form-based codes do sometimes try to anticipate and focus retail by doing things like requiring a retail capable first floor height. So you'll see some places that do that. But I think generally communities have anticipated, expected, or desired more retail than is usually feasible to get. If you look at some of the discussion in the overarching issues section of this vision plan, we talk about the market study, a lot of residential potential, not as much big retail potential going forward over the life of this plan. But if you get enough of that residential, eventually there's a small retail that comes that does start to want to be part of the picture. The coffee shop example is the classic one. And, you know, there may be some streets where it's important to ask that buildings be capable of that. We can regulate use under form-based code. There's nothing that says you can't have some say about uses within this code, but the focus is overwhelmingly on the form.
Okay.
That brings up the main thing. I think this is great, first of all. Not quite sure how to formulate this thought, but it seems that my theory is that the pandemic has revealed that there was technology here before the pandemic that allows us to live differently than we were living, and that we're probably not going to go all the way back. You know, we're having people call in and show up on screens at the Williston Selectboard meeting now, and we didn't do that a year ago. I think this is a really wonderful idea because it seems to me that the box stores are doing surprisingly well, although maybe not, you know, sustainably well for the future. But they're hanging in there. But I also, keep thinking of, and bear with me on this scattered thought. My wife and I went hiking in the Jerusalem Trail, which was surprisingly hard. And we've been working out. But we're going by rural Vermont, and there's a silo, and there's a barn, and there's a whatever. And as a native Vermonter, I'm saying, when I was growing up, these were real places. And this was not like, oh, I want to build a red barn because someday in 2021, a whole bunch of people that I will now call flatlanders are going to be coming around and they're going to go, oh, look, it's almost like this isn't a real place. It's just so beautiful. No, that was economic. That was somebody trying to make money and feed their family, and it was an industry. And I get concerned that, someday people are going to go by, Williston and say, oh, remember there used to be a Walmart there? Remember that before you could just order it and it would show up? And so, I mean, I that's not that far-fetched, but what I'm enjoying about seeing this come together is that and I'll be very blunt about this, what the hell do I know? Not the stuff that I'm talking about right now. But it seems like this builds kind of a critical mass of pedestrian-friendly residential aesthetic, which will be amenable to future economic growth, so that we're not building, a big red barn or a silo, but then we don't put the grain in silos anymore. We do it differently, but they're still there. Well, we could put a cell tower on it. Well, now this is a this is almost like an economic model for the future, because if there are people who are working at home, it's not such a bad thing to have a place that looks like there might be a place for a coffee shop, and there might be a place for a smaller store that would be something that would be a kind of a destination or a local gathering place or something like that. So I'm very impressed with the work that's been put into this, and if I'm right about the economics of this, and again, I don't know, I think this is a really good way to go, and the things that are the friction points, four-story building, okay. I don't know, but I just wanted to say that I going forward, coding all of this, it would, my hope would be that it would be something that would be thinking about how people are going to live going forward into the 21st century.
I'm going to ask Megan Cope to come up and talk a little bit about that, because we've had some conversations about both the economic resilience elements of this, as well as thinking about creating a place where people are going to live the way they might be living post-COVID, with that work from home and the need for spaces to interact with beyond maybe the apartment.
Yeah, thank you. Nice to see you all in person. I'm really glad you mentioned those things, Ted, because I think that what you're talking about in a lot of ways at the heart of form-based code, and the flexibility question comes up as well, Jeff. My enthusiasm for form-based code is really lodged in the fact that it supports people's everyday lives, and it allows people to do things that are actually set out in our town plan, that we as a planning commission, our mission is to make sure that we're making recommendations based on the town plan. So one thing that's included here is for instance, having well-designed public spaces, whether it's an outdoor space, whether it's a streetscape that accommodates a variety of transportation modes, whether it's a sidewalk space or what's called a dooryard right outside a building. Those are, in my opinion, particularly really essential to the success of this kind of project, because not only are they flexible, we know that we can change streets, right? We added bike lanes to Route 2, or somebody added bike lanes to Route 2. We don't have it under our jurisdiction right now, but, and we know that with technology, our daily lives are changing a lot. As you say, quite rightly, we're working from home. We're getting material goods delivered more and more. And at the same time, we are experiencing, and I think the pandemic really heightened this, we're experiencing a more of a desire to get outside, right? To walk, to enjoy nature, to enjoy the scenery that we have here. We want to another thing that we couldn't do in the pandemic much was gather. And we know how much that sustains us as humans. And these, again, are things that are in our town plan. Our health amendment includes things like social connectivity and how important that is, particularly for elder folks, as well as children, I mean, really across the age span. We know that getting outdoors is good for physical health, it's good for mental health. Our health folks who helped us make the health amendment, you know, were strongly pushing the argument that better access to outdoor spaces, you know, improves lots of different kinds of metrics in their, you know, their sort of dashboard of health indicators. And so I feel that, you know, whether we're talking about more of the public spaces or whether we're talking about things like the density that's achieved by 3 or 4 story buildings that also would allow a greater diversity of types of households, could address some equity issues that we also know are very pressing for our town and everywhere. You know, would also then have some very practical effects. And here comes the energy plan, right? Because when we have that density and that concentration of people, we allow public transit to be more feasible. We allow, you know, a much greater efficiency of use of public utilities, of physical materials, all of those things. So though, you know, I'm really glad you had that inclination, Ted, and I think, you know, it's absolutely spot on. I think there are tremendous benefits to the kind of approach that we're embarking on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm sort of looking to have people identify something that gives them heartburn about what they've read, and that's where looking at my own heartburn, I think, was looking at the town taking over the Route 2 and Route 2A. But, and that sounds like a long time coming. And so, anybody?
Not something that necessarily gives me heartburn, but I just wanted to get an understanding of, you know, whether or not in developing this code, you know, things like reduction of fossil fuels have been considered, and you know where you know kind of some of these environmental impacts. You know, obviously we had the huge contingent from Sustainable Williston here today, which was great. But in thinking about you know incorporating some of these concerns of our energy plan and all of that, and how that will be incorporated into this.
Sure. Well, there's a couple of effects of concentrating or focusing development pressure in the growth center. So Megan Cope, who was just up here, mentioned several of them. When you have a denser population, it's more feasible to serve that population with transit. We have had sort of a stated goal in our discussions that people who work in Williston ought to be able to live in Williston. It's more of an equity conversation, but of course, if you really can live and work in Taft Corners, your carbon emissions related to transportation are greatly reduced. That said, most people, you know, some of their carbon emissions comes from getting to and from work, but a lot of it comes from other kinds of trips to shop, to socialize, to participate in government, to come to meetings like this, all of those kinds of things. And so when we plan for a development pattern that gets that density where you can walk to the grocery store, a lot of us haven't experienced being in a place where you can walk to the grocery store. One of the things that happens is you go to the grocery store more because you tend to go 3 or 4 times a week rather than the traditional, big shop, fill the back of the car. But when you can walk to the grocery store, you're not driving to the grocery store. I walk to the hardware store in my neighborhood most weekends because that's what I spend my weekends doing, is fixing my house. But I walk because it's 5 minutes and it's a break from whatever project I'm working on, and it's reasonably pleasant and safe to do that. So not starting up the car and all of that. Another really big component of something like this is building energy for heating and cooling. So, most of the proposed development pattern under this vision is multifamily, which means that dwellings are sharing roofs, walls, and/or floors with one another. So, from a thermal perspective, there's just an energy savings related to that. So, a couple of things there. This plan is really heavy on walkable and bikeable infrastructure. So if you just have the density, but there's, cars just streaming by, that's not going to work. This plan deals with that and makes that a place, plans for a place in Taft Corners where that's truly feasible, because it's not just baseline safe, but pleasant and interesting. Jeff Speck, famous planner, does this thing about walkable cities, and the walk needs to be safe, it needs to be useful, and it needs to be interesting. So that's the kind of place you want to create. Does that answer the question?
It does. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Chapin.
2 quick things. One is with hybrid meetings. Sometimes the people who are electronic are left for last, and here I am saying I want to speak, but I hope anybody want to speak gets to. But I wanted to take a step back because Williston has changed a lot in the last 50 years, and this plan is trying to look at how we're going to allow for what might happen in the next 50. And the Planning Commission, when we have hearings and various things happening, most people just don't want change. They like it the way it is, and they don't want things to change. They say, let's just stop development, no more development. And that's a really strong feeling among Williston people. And so I want to acknowledge that. And one of the ways we as a town have dealt with it quite effectively is by having a rural ag district where we don't allow dense development, and having a relatively small sewage area that has residential and other zoning. And we have designated the growth center in the Taft Corners area for some time. And within the Planning Commission, as well as in the town, people say, oh, I don't want 3- and 4-story buildings, that's not in my scale. And so we want it to be the way it is. So it really is a hard thing to visualize how things could be and still be okay. But the fact that we have pressure for growth, and we can't turn that away. If we do turn it away, what we wind up is just the high cost growth. We wind up becoming more of an elite society without affordable. We have a problem getting affordable housing because it gets expensive to build in Williston. And so if we're going to meet the regional demand for housing, which is the highest demand right now, we need to create multifamily housing, and by adding more stories, we can do it less expensively and developers will do it. And so in a sense, we're trying to solve a difficult problem of how do we do what we don't really want to do? And I'm speaking sort of as the heart of Williston. We don't want density, we don't want tall buildings, but also we want to keep our fields, we want to keep our farmlands open the way they are. And we've been very successful, like with the Environmental Fund purchasing and rights and so forth. And so somehow we want to preserve that. We want to preserve the way the Civic Village Center is, but still respond to the growth pressures of the region. And we've responded to shopping pressures in the past. So that, to me, that's what we're dealing with. And when you talked about heartburn, Terry, we haven't talked about this in working on form-based code, but I worry about, we want to make it a place at Taft Corners, but what if it then became such a place that it's like Essex Junction within Essex Town, where it competes as the place with the rest of the town? And how do we make that, let it be a dense area that develops and not be in competition with the village and the rest of Williston as an identity? And so that's where my heartburn is.
I hadn't thought about that, but that's giving me heartburn now that you mentioned it too.
So Matt, can I, I think Ted had a good point, I don't know what I don't know, or I can't understand or glean from this. What are the liabilities or the heartburn issues that we should be aware of?
Well, so I think as Chapin mentioned, general discomfort with growth and change. So, one thing that is challenging about an exercise like this is we go and we draw a picture, a map of Taft Corners in 2070 under the guidance of this vision. And there's a lot more buildings in 2070, and some of them are taller, and some of them are in places that are open fields today. That's challenging to look at. The drawing that we didn't do is the drawing of what we look like in 2070 under business as usual. But, I can sort of list off, as I mentioned, my Lot 30 example, all of Finney Crossing, all of Cottonwood Crossing, not to say really bad things about those projects, but they do represent 100% compliance with today's development standards. So if there are things you see in those and you say, well, as things develop more or redevelop, we know there's going to be this, it's like a stream, the pressure. We can channel it somewhat, but we can't send it back uphill. The development pressure is there. As that pressure comes in over the next 50 years, how would you like to channel it? And so what are some of the liabilities? The vision here requires some big asks from the development community. To fulfill this vision, there's land that needs to be set aside for open space in an organized way. The town can participate in that, but there's also part of that is an ask of private landowners to work with the town to do that. It's very likely that achieving this vision will mean imposing a higher and more expensive architectural standard on some new development. A lot of the feedback that fed into the commission and staff desire to take on this project was some negative feedback about the look of some of the newer buildings in town. Flat, blocky, Soviet, were some of the words that we were hearing in the office. Well, that can be remedied, with a different development standard, but it may mean saying to somebody, well, we don't allow that material on your street-facing facade. We only allow these other more expensive materials. We've done some of that in the past. This would do quite a bit more of it. There may be places where we say, if you're going to build on this site, it shouldn't be just a one-story building. It should utilize the land better than that. There may be folks who would like to come to Williston, but only if they can have a really, really, really big parking lot because some spreadsheet that was created in 1975 says they need it. And you might say no to them, and they might say, well, then we're not going to come. Williston, in a very informal way, said no to rezoning the Cottonwood site to allow a Target to come in about almost 10 years ago now. And I always tell people that that's the hidden story about Target repurposing existing space in the South Burlington University Mall, is there was a attempt to build that in a place that the town had not planned for it. And again, only in an informal way, but that was all it took. The town sort of said, no, we've planned for something that doesn't have big box retail in this site. So somebody might not build here because of the development, the constraints that this plan imposes on them. but somebody else might. And I think that's just always a possibility.
So much of the, I assume much of the actual review that would be done under a form-based code would be done by the DRB. How do they feel about this?
So we've interacted with the DRB at a couple of stages in this process. The intent of a form-based code generally is to be quite prescriptive, sort of a go, no-go code that requires very little interpretation. So we had a conversation with our consultant team early on about, some form-based codes are actually completely administrative. South Burlington City Center works this way. There is a staff person who can review a proposal for a whole new development site and building, and if it meets the standard, that person can sign that permit and the project can build. In part, because of the way appeals of administrative decisions work in Vermont, they go to the DRB. What we've recommended is that there be a truncated DRB review for anything that comes in under this code. And, our current staff report regime is a lot like this anyway. We recite all the requirements of the bylaw and explain, that we think the project's meeting it, or when we don't, we say we don't. So the DRB will see these. We also think, because of the evolving nature of Williston out of this very single tenant retail heavy environment, there will be times when an applicant wants a waiver from some piece of the code. And waivers, in my mind, can be an effective tool if you codify the waiver that's available and you specify the findings of fact the DRB needs to make in order to grant it. In other words, try to take the subjectivity out of it. So I imagine there will be some of that there as well that the DRB will need to do. So one thing about the DRB is there's a fair amount of discomfort when we get into the realm of regulating taste and architectural style. The DRB wants to hear from the staff, the building needs to be 10 feet from the sidewalk. Yes, the building is 10 feet from the sidewalk. Yes, you may approve. When we get into even some of the things that Williston has attempted to codify in the design review district, they're scratching their heads sometimes. Or they're trying to figure out how to get a pitched roof element to work on a flat top building somewhere, and it's not making sense. Those things will be much better figured out in a unified code like this. So what we've offered to the DRB is there may be more of this that's sort of out of your control decision-wise, but on these things that you as a group have really struggled with, there's going to be a lot more specificity.
Anything else? A few minutes ago, you mentioned, are we building a new neighborhood at Taft Corners? But Williston already has neighborhoods all over the place, just like a city does. That they're neighborhoods of maybe like people, and so I don't see this as being anything different than we've got already by building this at Taft Corners. I worry about infrastructure needs, but that comes with the planning process. So we'll see what happens with that. Any other questions or comments? Congratulations to the consultants and to the Planning Commission on putting together a great proposal at this point.
Yeah, a lot of work. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
I'll just close saying thank you to the Planning Commission, the CCRPC, and the consultant team. I know we have Planning Commission members online. I don't know if any have indicated they wanted to say anything. I wanted to make sure they had that opportunity.
Yeah, I know they're listening, but I didn't see any hands or comments to speak.
So again, our goal is to get on with the coding, but eyes wide open and fully communicative to the select board about some of the things that we're wrestling with, and that you'll hopefully see the results of that wrestling match over the next couple of months.
I do have a hand raised from Al Senecal listening online. Do you want
Sure.
to comment? Al, I'm gonna, oops, I saw you put your hand down. Al, Okay, it's back up. Okay, here we go. Just unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to say a few things. I was at the planning meeting the last week, and I just wanted to make sure that I had a few things to say. I think that this is a great plan that the Planning Commission has put forth, and all the work that they've done. Everybody, Jeffrey and his team deserve a great deal of hand clapping. They did a great job. It was a lot of work. I think that the Planning Commission had a lot of good things to say last week. Some of the things were the streets may be too narrow. How do you deal with some of the snow plowing issues on those compact sites? And those all need to be taken into consideration. The plans are all very compact, and it's not something that the developers and the landowners are used to, but it's certainly, it's something that we're willing to work with. And I want to make sure that you get input from the landowners and the developers, because, in the end, they're the ones that put an awful lot of time, money, effort, and they go out and take some pretty good sized loans to make these projects happen. So, they deserve to be heard from as well. And I also want to make sure that I'm on record. There was, on my property, there was a 16-acre park shown. And I just want to make sure that everybody knows that nobody really talked to me about, putting 16 acres of my property into a park and then putting a viewing tower on that. So I just want to make sure that it doesn't get put into a plan that just shows up and everybody's expecting a beautiful 16-acre park that was, on some private owner's property. And then just for the record, I know there was some discussion on the Burr Oak community up on the hill, and that may play into that part, but I've talked to a tree specialist who says that, the Burr Oak community is probably one of the most populated trees in North America. So it's not like it's on the endangered species list or anything. And I just want to be on the record to let you hear my thoughts on this, and let you know that I am in agreement with the the whole plan overall, but those are some of the things that I want you guys to consider.
Good, thank you.
Thank you.
So I think we're at the end of our discussion tonight on the form-based code. Thanks to the Planning Commission, thanks to everybody who attended tonight, the consultants and everyone. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we're up to the manager's report.
Yes, and I'll be very brief this evening. late hour here, but just to reiterate, our Muddy Brook culvert replacement project is about set to get underway next week. So we'll anticipate the closure and the removal of the temporary bridge on right around Monday, I'm told, and we'll have a closure there for at least 3 months. We're expecting it to November, maybe on a one lane in November, but we'll see how that project progresses. It's been a long time coming and a lot of hard work by partners, City of South Burlington with us and all the consultants on that. So
That's going to cause traffic issues
Oh, yeah.
all over.
Oh, yeah.
yeah, we're anticipate they have a detour in place, but we're certainly will be hearing some feedback on traffic, I imagine.
It happened a couple of years ago, and it has to happen.
Yep, agreed.
The other piece, our consultant team from AP Triton on our fire and EMS services delivery, our service analysis project, they'll be making their site visit to town. I think they're coming in on Sunday, and they'll be here Monday and Tuesday. With board members who haven't responded, if you're interested in sitting down with an interview with a consultant, they certainly love hearing from you. If you don't have time while they're here, that's fine too. They can set something up over the phone later in the week or the following week. So I think Lisa may have reached out to every board member from the fire department. If you could just follow up with her, she can coordinate that if you're interested. And tax bills are mailed and payments are starting to come in. So that's always good news.
Greta and I are on for Sunday afternoon together to meet with the the consultant on the fire department. So there are plenty of opportunities at this point, so hopefully you can sign up. Other business, we do have a catering permit to take up tonight.
Yes, I got this afternoon. It's for a wedding at the Isham Family Barn on August 28th. Meets all the requirements for use there. It is from Big Red Presents LLC, doing business as Misery Loves Company out of Winooski. Staff has no objections to this permit application, as it's a use at that facility.
Any questions for Eric on that? Need a motion then?
We approve the permit.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Any opposed? We've done that. Any other business that people would like to bring up tonight? I have just one. We have a momentous occasion happening on this Saturday, and the town manager is getting married. So he will be gone on his honeymoon for at least a week. So don't try to contact it.
Well, thank you very much, Terry. And well, while I'm away, we'll have Chief Foley serving as acting manager and Shirley helping him out. So I'll be back August 13th.
So congratulations.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
So hearing no other business, we are adjourned.